Today, we are opening the door to learn a bit about grief and bereavement on this journey of dementia. As we can all agree, it's a continuous loss of regrouping, picking yourself up, and starting again. As uncomfortable as this subject matter is, we feel it's important to label feelings and emotions as they relate to our current situations. We hope that we will become better educated on a subject that is a bit difficult to discuss, but one that might help us to prepare and better understand what's going on inside of us today. We have Audrey Page. She is a Bereavement Service Coordinator for VITAS Healthcare. Audrey previously was a continuous care coordinator, then became a continuous care supervisor, and now holds the position of Bereavement Services Coordinator. Her career with VITAS has spanned 12 years. Audrey shares a personal journey as a caregiver as her grandmother has Alzheimer's disease. Audrey is a proud mom of two very talented adult children and loves the fact that she is a true born and raised Floridian. We also have Dr. Jeffery Steele. He is a Bereavement Service Manager for Volusia, Flagler, Putnam counties for VITAS Healthcare. His role is to provide psychological, social, and spiritual education to the VITAS teams, as well as bereavement support training to the company. He also works with the marketing department to provide education to facilities about the services they offer. To date, they serve 900 people. In addition to all of that, currently Jeffrey facilitates numerous caregiver support groups, as he's part of a national team for VITAS Healthcare as a co-support group leader for parents who have lost children. On a personal note, Jeffrey has lived abroad in London, England for 16 years and has recently returned to Florida as of February 2020. His passion when he's not working is surfing and going on surf trips. We are thankful you are both here today, and I am going to pass the meeting off you, Jeffrey. Thank you.
One of the things that I have noted just in my professional career, particularly around the area here of bereavement and memory care, is that a lot of times, and sadly so, the memory care caregivers and even those memory care patients can easily fall through the cracks of what we would say that's anticipatory grief, but also grief itself. And grief is something that is experienced by many people with significant loss in their life, depending on what that loss is. Oftentimes, we associate bereavement with mourning, and mourning is often associated, of course, with the permanent loss of a loved one in our life, and then we mourn that loss because the person isn't around anymore. We don't see them. With bereavement, we have something a little bit different. What we have is oftentimes, particularly with dementia patients, Alzheimer's patients, is that the person's still there, but there's numerous aspects of grief going on. And sometimes we may not stop and think about it. That's why many in the memory care have called the grief that is associated with Alzheimer's and dementia is called managing ambiguous loss and grief. So managing ambiguous loss and grief. And one caregiver from Canada actually said it quite well. He said, the word ambiguous helps me understand what was going on. I'm still married to my wife. I love her, but I don't live with her. I've always been crazy about her and still am. She's looked after, but it is a huge loss for me. The ambiguity is exactly how I feel. And that may resonate with some of you as well, because with dementia or Alzheimer's, you have a loss first of all, there's a bit of a loss that you experience as caregivers for the person in the relationship that you had is no longer the same. And there's a real loss there. It's a change. It's not what it used to be. It's not how things, used to talk and share memories. And now the patient may not have those memories anymore. And you wonder, is the person still in there? Is this the person I've been married to for 30, 40, 50, 60 years? And there's a loss there. There's another loss that caregivers experience that I think is often forgotten or maybe not even spoken about. It's the loss and bereavement that you have feelings for what the patient has actually lost. So you grieve and bereave the loss that they are experiencing themselves, that they no longer remember these things or no longer are able to participate in certain projects or things with you anymore in the relationship you once had. So you have your own loss in the relationship. You experience their loss of their own skills and cognitive abilities, but then also we can experience the loss when we have advanced dementia, advanced Alzheimer's disease, when it takes our loved one's life. And this goes on oftentimes in a cycle. And so it's often the issue of loss and grief is one of the most significant issues when supporting people live with loved ones with dementia as their caregivers. Losses and grieving occur in different ways at all stages of the dementia journey. So people listening to this talk are undoubtedly at different places, but the grief and what's going on, you may, at the moment you hear that the person has on-stage dementia, a grief may begin to set in of worry as well about what is it going to be like when I lose this person, but the person is still there? What's going to happen? So one of the things that we call grief with dementia is that it's a constant and yet hidden companion. Grief is a constant yet sometimes hidden companion of dementia, because the person who has dementia also experiences grief and loss. They grieve of the fact that they can't remember, and they may at some different stage. So this is a topic, I think, that is underappreciated, I think, in caregiving. And I think it's something that we are working hard at in VITAS to, that's why we have these support groups outside of our office for the community before somebody is in need of hospice care, so that they may feel lonely, but we want them to know that they're not alone on this journey. And that's really, really important. And that's why you have this wonderful group of everyone here today as well. So caregivers often experience a continuous and a profound sense of loss and subsequent grief as you live through the changes associated with the progress of the disease. I remember one lady, and I was doing a group, and I won't name her, when Audrey and I were there. She said she wakes up every single day and she starts her day, sits on the side of the bed and said, today is my new normal. So whatever changes are going on or whatever is happening, today is my new normal. And this is something that I've taken on and thought, that is a wonderful coping mechanism to go through when you're dealing with something and changes are happening. And sometimes decline can be rapid, it can be fast, and you feel like you can't even hold on and catch up to what's going on around you. So you have this grief that's going on, and grieving is it's an up and down progress. Okay, we're going to look at the stages of grief in a little bit, and You may swing from despair to wild optimism in this because your emotions can be naturally, this is all normal. I should say that as well. All of this is normal. Grief is normal. Everybody has it, but not everybody has it the exact same way or at the same time. Okay, so everybody is unique in their expression of grief and bereavement, and that is something that needs to be respected, heard, listened to, and the people need to be held and respected with dignity because it is different. Because no two dementia patients are the exact same either. They're not the same. So feelings like these are a normal part of grieving. Okay, but if you experience them, it's very, very important when you do to realize that you may be under a great deal of stress and you may need to seek some support for yourself, and that's okay as well. Just quickly, I just want to say something about grieving in the final stages of dementia. So when the person with dementia reaches the final stages, he or she may no longer be able to recognize you or to communicate with you properly. This can be very painful, very painful. Although the person is still alive, you may still feel a sense of bereavement because you have lost the person that once was. You're aware that the relationship between you may be almost over as far as physical. Yet you can't mourn the person fully because he or she is still alive. This is the complicated part of grief and bereavement in dementia caregivers. At this time, you may find that just sitting there, holding hands, or placing an arm around the person may bring comfort to you both with no words. It may also help to comfort you to remember that you've been very courageous, you've been very loyal, and you've done all you could in your human capacity. Because that's important to remember at that end stage. Some caregivers of persons with dementia find that they are grieved or that they have grieved the loss of a person for so long that they're worried about not having any feelings when the person ultimately and finally passes. So others do experience a range of emotional reactions during this time. What are those emotional reactions? Maybe you can identify with some of these. Here they are. Feeling numb, denial of the situation, shock and pain, even when death was expected, relief, both for the person with dementia and for yourself as caregiver, guilt, sadness. Here's a difficult one, feelings of isolation, and then a sense of a lack of purpose. You've been caregiving for so long. Now what? Who am I? These things are questions that are normal that sometimes happen. For some people, it's normal to go through these feelings for a very long time. And if you've been looking after someone with dementia, you may feel a huge void in your life when that person's gone. But even if you are coping well generally, you may still find that there are times where you feel especially sad or upset. Celebrations, family events, birthdays could be particularly hard. You may need to lean on family and friends for support during these times. And during the months following the person's passing, try to, now this is where we know we don't give advice, but I want to give a little bit of advice here, something that I've learned from my practical experience. Try to avoid making major life-changing decisions right at first, when you're still feeling shocked or vulnerable. Give it some time, give yourself time. Seek out a family physician if you feel like you've developed too much anxiety or depression, to see if you could get a little bit of help for some time. Now, bereavement is the objective event of loss. Mourning, the difference, mourning is the outward acknowledgement of the loss. Okay? So bereavement is the objective event of the loss. Mourning is the outward acknowledgement of the loss through emotions. What are some myths about grief? What are myths about this? All people, everybody, we're in a dementia and a memory group here, all bereaved grieve in the same predictable way. That's a myth. Let me say, there is no right way or wrong way to grieve. Okay? Healing from grief involves getting over the loss and generally takes a year. That's a myth. Grief is not like the flu. Everyone is unique. Okay? It's not like the flu. Another myth is it's better not to think or talk about the pain. Just push it aside. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to think about it. That's a myth, that it's better to do that. Avoiding grief can create negative effects, both physically and emotionally, to avoid it. Another myth is the intensity or length of your grief reflects how much you loved the deceased. That's a myth. That is not the case. Okay? So, there are some different theories that are past and present in the past. So let me just name some physical experiences of grief. Dizziness, shortness of breath, tightening of the chest and throat, lowered immunity systems, sleep and eating disturbances, inactivity, or hyperactivity. Cognitive experience of grief. What goes on? Confusion, irritability, sometimes paranoia even. Difficulty concentrating, gaps in memory, auditory or visual issues, odd dreams, and searching behaviors. The emotional experience of grief can be shock, disbelief, pain, disorganization, anger, and guilt. Social experiences of grief. What happens with us socially when we're grieving? We take on roles or tasks of the deceased partner, okay? Or if the person is not deceased, what the person used to do when they were alive but are no longer cognitively able to do that. You become both. You have difficulty sometimes being with others. You could possibly feel jealous of others' happiness. You have to cope with changing relationships. You have to establish identity as a single person. And you may feel embarrassed about not being better yet. But there's also spiritual experiences of grief. You learn to define what is now meaningful to you. You redefine a relationship with the lost person. You can report confidence and new skills that you've acquired. You can rekindle old relationships with friends that you've not been able to see due to constant caregiving. You can start new ones. You can take on new interests or hobbies. You can make future plans. You can enjoy reminiscing about your loved one. So men and women grieve differently as well. Okay? There's a difference. Say, for instance, with the loss of a spouse or partner, men can tend to be what's called more instrumental grievers. Okay, we're going to look at that. And women tend to be more expressive grievers. Okay, women are very good at connecting the left brain and the right brain, so to speak. The left brain, that rational side, and that right brain, that emotional side. But men still do it, but they do it differently, and they may not express it the way that they are actually experiencing it. And a group and things like what we're doing here today are good platforms that are safe for men to be able to say, that I as a man, we deal with things emotionally as well. Okay? Intimacy with our spouse is just as emotional as it is for a woman, but it's emotionally different, but it still carries powerful emotions. So the length of the relationship does not predict the grief response. Okay? It does not do that. So, providing bereavement care. It's important to provide an environment for yourselves that allows and encourages your individual expression of grief. All right, so when we have a group like this, or when I and Audrey lead a group, it's very important to create an atmosphere, one of trust, because to come and speak about these things is to express a vulnerability, and it takes a lot of courage to do that to people you don't know. And sometimes people may feel ashamed about the things that they are feeling. And one of the things that's very important in dealing with grief is to find that place where you can be open and honest about the emotions and thoughts you experience. In order to listen, if you take the word listen, you can write the word listen down on a piece of paper, look at all the letters. You rearrange those letters of the word listen, and you spell the word silent. To listen, to hear where people are, we must silence our presuppositions in our mind, our thoughts, the things that we have, even our own experiences. We must remember that people experience things differently. That is why I think Sherry has with the group about giving advice, because the thing we may hear that something that really worked for somebody that may be very, very good, that we may, hey, I may want to try that. But it's very wrong to say you should grieve, you should do this for your grief. You're not having enough faith, you're not having this or that. That does not help anybody. Some things that I've learned not to say to the bereaved is, I know how you feel. No, I don't. I know how I feel. You tell me how you feel. You shouldn't feel that way. Don't say that. It was God's will. Don't think about it. Be strong. You must get on with your life. You'll find someone else. Be thankful you have other children. He or she led a full life. It was just time. It could have been worse. These things you don't say. Listening, paraphrasing what was said, and asking for clarification and repeating back to them is the kind of thing we need to do. So if you are experiencing grief, you have the permission to grieve in your own way. Okay? You have that. I want to just quickly say, so Audrey can say a few things. I'm flipping through my slides here, my normal teaching quite quickly. What are the benefits of a support group? You discover others who truly do understand. You learn innovative ways to cope. Bereaved who are struggling may benefit first from individual support. And there's a difference between normal grief and what we call complicated grief. Almost any reaction is normal for a period of time after a significant loss. The grief is intense, all-consuming, and lasts a long time. There may be indications that there's complicated grief. High risk factors that lead to maladaptive adjustments. These are problems and signs that they are experiencing complicated grief. There are a number of psychological risk factors that I'll bring up if there are any questions about that. But the social environmental risk factors are stressful events, financial hardships, living arrangements, loss of constant companion, survivor lived at a distance from patient, and illnesses perceived as socially unacceptable. Okay, we have interventions for that. So what I want to do is to pass it on to, I'm looking at the time already, it's 4 o'clock. Pass it on to Audrey to talk about some tips for dealing with that, and then perhaps in the questions and answers we can get more involved into the stages of grief, et cetera, what those are, identifying them, and maybe ways that we can address those issues. So I give it to Audrey.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and stress the importance of taking care of yourselves. You guys spend so much time being the caregivers that you have to take at least 5 minutes a day for yourself, whether it's 5 more minutes in the shower. Take 5 minutes to write down your feelings for the day. Take a walk outside. Just remember to always take care of yourselves, and it's okay. It's okay to feel that pain. It's okay to feel the joys. Live in the moment. When those happiness, those joyful moments come in, cherish those. And I just wanted to touch on that. You got to take care of yourselves to be able to take care of anybody else.
So the Kubler-Ross gave basically 5 stages of grief, and those are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It's important to realize that, so you have the denial, it's an overwhelming emotion. It's not unusual. Denying it gives you sometimes as a mechanism to grasp gradually the news that's being processed to you. So it's this sorrow that you're being confronted with, a sorrow that you're actually denying. But this is part of the journey of grief, and this part can be quite difficult because your mind is playing 2 games. So it's sort of like in the denial is that I'll use it with dementia, that you walk around the corner and your spouse is sitting in a chair and you're just thinking they're going to turn around and say something to me about our children together and about our family, and some memory is going to come, and it's right around the corner, and then this isn't happening to me because the results are all wrong. That's that stage of denial. The second one, of course, as I said, is anger. And you can get angry at the person if they cared for themselves or took their medicines or went to the doctor when they needed to. This would not have happened. We could have called it earlier. And anger starts often with blaming, looking for a reason, something to blame or someone to blame for this. If it's spiritual, where is God in all this? And how dare God let this happen to me? So that's part of the anger stage. And then the other part of grief is when we begin to bargain. and those moments of intense emotions. It's a way of actually looking for a way to regain control. So we might say something in the bargaining, if only I'd called that night, or I'd done this, or if I'd done that, he or she wouldn't be gone, or if only we had gone to the doctor sooner, well, we could have stopped this and got medication sooner, and it wouldn't have happened and progressed so fast. So you begin to bargain with yourself about that. And then of course, one of the natural things about grief, and being it's had such a stigma historically, is depression. Whereas in anger and bargaining can feel very active, a very quiet stage of grief can be that depressive stage. So you may be running from the emotions. You may be trying to stay ahead of them. You may begin to, why go on at all? What am I without this person? Who am I without this person? My whole life has now come to this terrible end, and I'm all alone. That's the feeling of when we are depressed. Okay, and these are all normal. And the fifth one is acceptance. It's not necessary, and one of the things about acceptance, because sometimes when people talk to me, they tell me about feeling guilty about going somewhere and having fun. And it's very important, I think, to say that it's okay to go and have fun and enjoy that life that you still have. So acceptance is not necessarily a happy or an uplifting stage of grief. It doesn't mean you've moved on past the pain or the loss or your love for the loved one. It does mean that you've accepted it and you've come to understand what it now means in your life. So I'm so fortunate to have had so many wonderful years with this loved one. I always will have these memories, so long, of course, as we have our own cognitive abilities. And I have the opportunity to tie things up, to make sure I get to do what I want to do in these final weeks and months or years with this loved one. And so those are the 5 stages of emotions. So it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.